if I say too much more, I won't be able to, so thank you. And they have another one, but it was really good. Reverend Honey. Jeez. All these years. All right. Okay, moving right along. Whoa. So we continue into this month's theme, which is If We Listen. And today's talk is entitled Terms of Endearment. And it has very little to do with the film, by the way, so we'll move on to that. And most of today's talk is inspired, guided, supported by the book of the month, which is 7,000 Ways to Listen by Mark Nepo. So it's an extraordinary book. You can order it today if we don't have any more, but just so you know that I will refer to that a lot today. And today is Father's Day, and I want to start with a quote that Reverend Karen found for us for this week's e-blast. And so if you didn't get our electronic e-blast news, this is from Rocco Errico. And Rocco Errico is an extraordinary man. He's a scholar of the Aramaic language. Now, the Aramaic language is the language that Jesus spoke. Hardly anyone knows how to translate it, speak it, read it, write it. And he has exceptional things about the Bible that he does. But this quote I thought was wonderful for today. The term father is a term of endearment in the Near East and means beloved. Friends will call each other father. A father, when speaking to his son, will call him father, which means my beloved one. They use this term of affection as we would use honey, sweetheart, darling, and precious. These terms are not gender specific, so it is with father. Thus, two sisters will call each other father. That is from that, Middle Eastern culture. So I thought that was interesting, because, when I read the quote, that's what actually gave me the title for today, Terms of Endearment. And I thought we could take that further. And so, of course, I went to my first most favorite book, which is the dictionary. And father is a noun, as a term of endearment. A man in relation to his natural child or children, a man who has continuous care of a child or protection of someone or something. In Christian belief, the Father refers to with a capital F, the Trinity, God, the first person, or poetic literary terms. Sometimes it's used personifying a time or a river, such as Father Time. Also, father can be a priest. Oh, pray for me, Father. And there are phrases like father, like son, which we all have heard. And then it comes from the Old English fader, F-A-E-D-E-R, from an Indo-European root shared by Latin pater, or the Greek pater, hence paternal. So that comes from there. And then I know that there are probably all kinds of terms of endearment coming from father, either papa or daddy or pops, or I don't know, there are probably many names and terms for endearment that we use for our human biological fathers, that we do that. And so today is Father's Day. So what I want to do first of all is ask that we're going to speak into the room. Reverend Terry mentioned the memorial candle. Many of the biological fathers are no longer here, and some still are, and that's a blessing. But I'd like if you would join me and say your father's name or your term of endearment for your father into the room as part of the blessing. My father's name was Frank Michael D'Onofrio. Just take a moment, breathe, send a blessing. And then I'd like it if the fathers/grandfathers that are here today to please stand. And if you stay standing, because we have a little gift for you, Daddy-O. I don't know, I feel like I should have Daddy-O with my dress today. And these little gifts, we couldn't find enough remote controls. So Emmett said there aren't enough. And I thought about giving you church keys because of the play on words. And Amy Loudon came up with the fact, I thought about flashlights, they're practical, and you shine the light on us, and you're like little practitioners. So please accept this gift in appreciation for being our daddy-os. And when you get your flashlight, you may sit down, unless you decide to do some sort of wonderful display that has great lighting for that. Oh, now, I gave him a toy. What was I thinking? Oh, man. I thought you'd be appreciative that they came with batteries. That's maybe the mistake. We should have left them without the batteries, but to fathers. So I need to share with you that I'm very anxious about today's talk. Very nervous, very anxious in two ways. One, of course, because I knew Don was singing. I was like nervous and pride and all of that. But the other part is I want to quote from, where the heck did I put it? From Mark Nepo on that. Nobel laureate and poet Andre Gide, or Gide, I don't know how you pronounce that gentleman's name. Andre G. Gide. G-I-D-E. Thank you, Spring. Writes, if you go deeply enough into the personal, you will reach the universal. If you go deeply enough into the personal, you will reach the universal. Well, that called to me. And therein lies my dilemma for today, because it's not your father's Oldsmobile, nor is this your father's typical Father's Day talk, because you may not know, I did speak last year at Father's Day, but you may not have noticed, but people who know me a long time know that I usually don't give the talk on Father's Day. And that's because I don't know my dad, my father, my pater, my daddy-o. And so there's a part of me that doesn't really even know how to talk about this from that human side. I'm able to address it from the spiritual father side. And so it was very difficult for me, and I tend to pass the baton on Father's Day, because I thought, well, and originally John Boyle was going to do the talk, and he had other engagements, so we couldn't do that. So it's like, oh, okay, there's a reason I'm up here. So I need to tell you that, not knowing my father, Frank, what did I say his name? Yeah, Frank. Okay. Whew. Frank Michael D'Onofrio, and he shortened it to Don when they came to this country. I am Sicilian. I know I look more Irish, and I lean towards my maternal side. And it's been a journey for me. It's been a journey. So when I read this charge about talking about the personal, bringing it into the universal, I thought, okay, it's really time to start working with that. And what I did this year, I had hoped I'd actually have some information by now. I don't have. But there is something, thanks to this internet, there is something online called 23andMe, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's an ancestry program. It's like a DNA thing. So I splurged. I thought, I'm going to spend the money. I'm going to find out my DNA. I want to know more about my heritage and my background and some things that I've heard and la la la. Well, unfortunately, they don't have all the results. It didn't pass the first test right, which made me feel really comfortable. It's like, okay, I send you all my DNA and you don't tell me who I am. And but oh no, it did tell me that I am, and you scientists will tell me, the only thing I know so far is that I have longer telomeres. Oh, it's good? Thank you. Which makes me 3.14 years younger and allows me to wear this dress and not look out of date. So I don't know, I don't have the information that I wanted to have about my paternal ancestry, which is the genetic thing, because it told me, it said, and this is where it was like, it said, we need more information about your father and your father's family in order to be able to give you an accurate thing about your lineage, etc. And it was like, hello, if I had it, I wouldn't be asking you. So that approach to understanding my father kind of got sidetracked and shelved, and I'm gonna work on that. I sent them some more information that I could, and we'll see, and I'll find out what I need to find out about that. But I started thinking about, okay, I need to talk about father, and I thought about, well, if I didn't know my dad, my father, so I sometimes didn't know what I was missing. Sometimes you do, but sometimes you don't. And so I thought about, who are my ideal fathers? If I were to pick, so one of the first ones that comes to mind is Robert Young. Father knows best. And so I went online, and so Mark Nepo, I mean, synchronicity is so amazing, because who knew I was going to pick this topic title and what we're going to do? And Mark Nepo said in here that he felt that a lot of our fathers are the wise teachers, and so I thought about, well, ask Robert Young. Father knows best. And so Mark says that the greatest teachers have always been teachers of love and suffering. And he goes on to write, our capacity to endure and endear is an act of integrity that allows love to thaw the differences that freeze between us. Now, I was struck by that way in the back of the book, and I hadn't gotten to the end of the book yet, is a chapter called Endure or Endear. And I had chosen the topic Terms of Endearment. I thought, oh, here we go again. It's just that synchronicity. But then, to assuage what was going on emotionally for me, I went onto the internet, and Father Knows Best was on television from 1954 to 63, classic example of American pop culture. 4 of its 5 cast members were seasoned actors coming in. And despite the show's title, Jim Anderson, his character, wasn't really like a father. He was more like a dad that the TV audience connected to. He was a responsible parent who loved his wife and kids. He was a man who would do a paper route in the rain for his sick son. He was a man who'd always choose to see Princess, his daughter Kathy, in a school program rather than attend an important Chamber of Commerce dinner. His family came first, but it was a delicate balancing act. And I read that, and I remembered that, and I went, yeah. And then you know, so I have been having this seesaw of emotions all weekend. It's like, yes, that's that father idea. Oh yeah, I don't know what that means. I don't understand that. Okay, so what do I understand? And then it comes back to principle. It comes back to the father within. So Jim Anderson was one of the other ones. The other ideal father I'd have, Atticus Finch. Oh. Now, I don't know originally if it was because it was Gregory Peck that I wanted as my father. Because who would blame me? Or if it was the character. But in going back and rereading the book, I can assure you that it's really about Atticus Finch and the great depth and wisdom and, I mean, that guy. And I will tell you, sidebar trivia, I got to meet Gregory Peck. He came backstage. I was doing a show at the Mark Taper Forum in Los Angeles, and he came backstage to meet the next person I'll mention as a father figure. And so they came back, and they brought him in to meet us, and I was like, you know, I'm, 19, I don't know, 18, 19, and it was like, that's gorgeous man, but everything the gentleman and the scholar that you might expect of Mr. Peck. Then the third man who, as I say, I was privileged to share the stage with and get to know was Walter Matthau. And an extraordinary man. I know he played a lot of curmudgeonly type things, but he was one of the dearest, sweetest, kindest men on the planet. And I remember one night after rehearsals and doing things, I went up to him and I said, would you be interested in adopting me? because you know, not because he was famous, but I didn't think of him in that way. I didn't really even get that. But it was more like, you're such an extraordinary man. And I watched him with his wife, with his son, with his colleagues and all of that. And I thought, ooh, and he smiled sweetly and, you know, said some nice words, but he didn't file any papers and neither did I. But those were like the 3 men as I was kind of growing up that I thought if there were to be a father figure in my life, that would be it. Now, being the Italian, I'll give that first credit tonight, being the Italian-Irish little girl I was raised Catholic for part of that. And, you know, so the original father, capital F father within, had a different connotation than the one that I gleaned and researched and adopted as I got older and chose a more metaphysical path. And that's where I go. And then there was a sentence, a quote that I think I said last year, and I'm still trying to wrap around it and make it my own. And it's from poet Anne Sexton, who wrote, "It doesn't matter who my father was, it matters who I remember he was." And I don't doubt that that's actually true for some of you. For those of you who did grow up with a father, not all fathers are Jim Anderson or Atticus Finch. I know that. I'm not insensitive to that. And I think that her wisdom is really important to those of us who are mature adults now, those of us who follow a spiritual path, is that no matter what difficulties we may have had or have currently with our fathers, that it is essential that we start to look at it from a different perspective, from a higher purview of knowing that presence of God within the Father, as we know within our mother, or we know within each and every one of us. And you know, many industries have made their money and get support by extolling things like Father's Day and Mother's Day, and it's because what does it do? It gets us all mushy, and it taps into a whole bunch of loving and wonderful stuff, as well as some of the unhealed stuff. I know that. And yet that is exactly what we're called to do, and perhaps exactly what I'm called to do as I walk through this part of my journey at this age and time and space for me of father. And I know that that's exactly what was going on here. And so Mark Nepo continues to write, a good deal of our suffering comes from not going deeply enough into the personal to make it through, so we get stuck between the surface and the deep. So when we get stuck, we need to ask ourselves, am I leaning through my brokenness enough to be touched and restored by the wholeness of life? Being stuck in what is broken and personal is unavoidable. It's in the human mood. How long we live in that stuckness that depends not on avoiding feeling broken and personal, but on feeling it deeply enough to reach what's universal in the heart of our own very personal experience. So what did all that say? Because it's a lot to take in, particularly if our hearts are open or on our sleeves today and we're feeling vulnerable. But really, it's about leaning into the brokenness of whatever may have been your experience of the Father externally or the Father within, and leaning into that and not getting stuck in the difficulty, the pain, or the story, but hanging out there long enough, courageously enough to look at it, to feel the stuff that comes up, to breathe a whole lot more, perhaps to make a phone call to a practitioner, minister, and ask for prayer, to do the work in order to move through it into the wholeness. Now, in this chapter, endure or endear, I mean, he was talking about I looked it up. Endure means to carry through, to continue in existence, to suffer patiently without yielding. Endear goes back to what Rocco Errico said and says to make beloved. And so the prefix en equals, to, go into, to cause to be. So the question Mr. Nepo asks is, so how does going into our existence, going into our suffering, make us who we are and what we are dear? How do we take in what we encounter and turn it into something beloved? So I want to stop for a second, and because he uses the word suffering a lot there. And I don't want anybody into the angst. It's not so much about the suffering. If you want, because we are metaphysical teaching, let's go to the Buddhist idea of that. And Buddhists actually don't have a direct translation for the word suffering, which I thought was kind of cool. But they do have dukkha, if I pronounce that correctly, D-U-K-K-H-A. And one of the aspects or translations of dukkha is impermanence or change. So when we get into being stuck with the idea of impermanence, or we get into the concept of change, which makes a lot of people crinkle, we start our suffering. It doesn't mean that it has to be a hair shirt that you're wearing, but the suffering that we put ourselves through emotionally comes from that idea of our impermanence or change or our reaction thereof. And we teach in religious science, when things happen to us, and things happen. Good things happen, bad things happen, neutral things happen. Any or all of the things or events or circumstances that happen to us happen, but what is significant is our reaction to those things. And therein lies that bridge and that conflict. Because stuff can happen, and we can react dramatically,